Hi, I'm Julie Campoli, and we have reached the part of our program where we tap into the deep well of accumulated knowledge of the Loeb Fellowship. And we have asked Loeb Fellows to talk about something that they care about, share their ideas, and talk about their work in 5 minutes. Now, you're probably wondering, how do you get a Loeb to stop talking after 5 minutes? And we've asked them to prepare a very brief and highly focused presentation, limited to 10 slides. And we're going to take away the remote control, and the slides will advance on their own. And we call this Loeb University. And we'll have 3 sessions. The first one is this morning, and we'll have 2 more tomorrow. And we're going to give the podium over to 11 different Loebs, and we've asked them to address the theme of equity and resilience. This morning's, you will hear 4 stories that address the issue of, that tell a story of innovation. The first, how to reclaim and transform the noisy, dirty, neglected spaces in cities. Then how design can help bridge the gap between incomes and the rising cost of housing. And then how telling a story can help connect people to the green spaces in their cities. And then how disaster recovery can evolve into long-term resilience. We're going to start with Susan Chin, Under the Elevated, Pop-Ups, Pilot to Permanent.
Okay, go. The Design Trust's latest project, Under the Elevated, with New York City's Department of Transportation, has captured people's imaginations with its possibilities. We'd saved the High Line with our feasibility study over 15 years ago, and we realized space under elevated infrastructure is more important than the upper deck. L-Space is one of the city's last frontiers. These dark, noisy, and neglected spaces divide, disrupt, and blight many underserved neighborhoods. There's almost 700 miles of elevated transit infrastructure in New York City. That covers nearly 4 times the size of Central Park. We just can't afford to waste space. Most of the elevated is in Upper Manhattan, the Bronx, Brooklyn, and Queens. Much of this infrastructure was built over 60 to 100 years ago. Now MTA, city, or state DOT needs to maintain, reconstruct, or demolish it. It's a multi-jurisdictional challenge. Lighting these spaces is another challenge for DOT. Spaces are designed for cars, not pedestrians. The contrast between light and dark at underpasses was found a major cause for pedestrian accidents. Our site strategies include not just adding standard light fixtures for days, adding accent lighting in key locations, or painting the structure with reflective paint, or using lighter colors, not the standard dark green. Making spaces multifunctional with green infrastructure is baseline today. Asthma rates are highest along highways. Millions of gallons of stormwater course off of these elevated structures and overwhelm our sewer system, polluting our waterways with any rainstorm. So cleaning the air and capturing the stormwater from the elevated is essential for reclaiming these L spaces. Green infrastructure can also provide habitat for wildlife. Lighting projections and temporary public art, such as this, on the Manhattan Bridge, transform these structures and L spaces beneath. Art can also be permanent and a way to engage the community or activate the space. It's another unexpected use for these structures. It can be a mural, lighting, painting, planting, or installation. It can also be street art or graffiti. In Asia or Europe, markets, restaurants, shops, and studios tucked underneath bridges, highways, and rail lines are commonplace. But for us, transit engineers rule. Blocking access to the structure for inspection and repair hasn't been allowed. Getting permission for these shops at this transit hub in Jamaica, Queens was a challenge for MTA and Long Island Railroad. Now the challenge is getting retailers to see the advantage of these types of spaces. Skateboarders are often the first to discover lost spaces like L Space. Inspired by the more adventurous, we proposed L Spaces for active recreation, rock climbing walls, hiking or biking trails, skate parks, or basketball courts. Although dark and noisy, L Space also provides protection from sun and inclement weather. Some of these spaces can be majestic, like the sketch in the Highbridge Park here. Okay. In Chinatown, we collaborated with Chinatown Partnership, the local development corporation. We created a pop-up installation to test our recommendations. A gateway to Chinatown with red accent lighting, a community bulletin board, and seating in this loud space. The community wanted access to information. We typically think smartphone. We tested partnerships, community input, and maintenance. We also tested how to get the divisions within DOT to work together. Community engagement plays a critical part of the Design Trust projects. Women's Housing Economic Development Corporation, or WEDCO, and Chinatown Partnership linked us to the community and demonstrated how to permanently improve neighborhoods. Our fellows asked residents what they wanted under the elevated in Chinese and Spanish. They drew, pasted up comments on maps. They wanted seating, an elevator, better safety, information, and to mask the noise. In the South Bronx, we collaborated with WEDCO on the Boogie Down booth. The community wanted something bright. We created turquoise seating near a bus stop, not attaching to MTA's structure. A canopy with solar lighting and a directional speaker played music from the Bronx, jazz to hip hop. This was a real turning point for the project. Our Under the Elevated project convinced DOT's commissioner to create an L Space program and a prototype for the city booth. Thank you.
Next up, Mark Norman, Designing Affordability.
Ready. Designing Affordability is an exhibition I curated. It's now currently at the Center for Architecture in New York City. It's quite a moment for affordable housing. Thank you, Harriet. From press attention to exhibitions to books to articles, attention on this topic is not just among the practitioners and the advocates. Everyone seems to be talking about it and about these issues. The exhibition starts with a baseline, which tries to outline the issue. Of course, there really is no baseline. Land costs, zoning codes, market demand, all are things that make every project different. Nevertheless, we came up with an average cost of constructing a unit in New York City. And as you can see, using just development costs alone leaves a surprising number of New Yorkers out in the cold. The impetus for designing affordability was an acknowledgement of the accomplishments we've made in New York related to affordable housing, from the Koch plan to the Bloomberg plan and now the de Blasio plan. There's no other US city, I think, that's been as active and has so much of a commitment to affordable housing. That said, it's an issue that really just changes in its complexity and shifts and mutates rather than retreats. So if we move to development costs, the average sales price, even more families lose out. And I'm not even going to talk about Manhattan and lately growing parts of Brooklyn and Queens. So when I was working on mixed income developments in Harlem years ago, we marveled that we got 2,000 applications for 23 affordable units. Actually, those were the days. This is where we are today, the number of applications. And if you think about public housing, which is sort of our permanently affordable housing and our housing stock, there are more people on the waiting list in New York City than live in the cities of Newark or Buffalo. So the question is really important right now. So where are all these people that aren't entering lotteries or still sitting on waiting lists? How are they living? Well, they're designing their own affordability. So for me, it was the cooperative, the sixth floor walk-up, the illegal sublet. For other people, it's driving till they qualify or making do without. So there's 7 categories within the show and 23 projects. Thank you, Lobes, who represent some of these projects. I'm probably running ahead of my slides, but Just to go through the 7 categories, they're reimagining public housing, which is taking this amazing public resource and finding ways to preserve or produce units that are permanently affordable. There's deploying technology, which reduces costs or construction timeframes, enhances the physical environment with smart devices, or produces new materials. The exhibition is not just about designing affordability, but also financing affordability, enabling affordability, policing affordability, maintaining affordability. These projects don't represent an answer, but additional questions, provocations, and discussions for the possibilities. So building modularly, that is with the hope of constructing more efficiently and reducing delays and defects. Many of the projects in the exhibitions are collaborations, where policy, design, engineering, public health, and other fields are coming together. In some cases, developers are foregoing profit, in others, making a profit while also enhancing affordability. So constructing incrementally provides the ability for families to have a role in controlling their built environments in line with their financial abilities and have more choices as to where they live. We cannot ignore issues of race, income inequality, and the exclusionary policies, as Dan talked about, that hinder better outcomes for low-income families. So a number of the proposals address these issues. Rethinking Home acknowledges that the nuclear family might not be the ideal nor the norm, and that our development should reflect all the ways we create community. There are many housing types that are grandfathered, illegal, or no longer produced by the market. Most are also what we call naturally affordable. That's to say unsubsidized and thus the most vulnerable. These units are also greatly outnumber the units produced by the affordable housing industry. So finally, building simply, this looks at developments that have reduced almost every area of development costs while also creating sort of elegant and functional buildings. If we create or preserve 200,000 units in New York after having completed 165,000 units, how many will we lose to market forces? How do we save this housing, create new housing without the land or the political will? I think it's all of these sort of different solutions. So I tried to represent that in the show. I'm sorry it went through so fast. I hope you'll be able to see it, and we can talk about projects you see as innovative over the course of the weekend. Thanks.
I think you were 2 seconds under, Mark. Next up is Maria Jaakkola, Reconnecting the Blue-Green Experience.
Too eager to be here already. So I'm going to tell you a fairy tale, a bedtime story. I hope you're not going to fall asleep, not until the end of the presentation at least. So once upon a time, there were 2 cities, like twin sisters. They were the same size and the same age. And we'll call them Brenda and Hilda. But you probably know what their real names are. So both were lying with their heads and noses in the water, one facing the Atlantic and the other one the Finnish Gulf. And there were green veins running down their limbs. Brenda had got a necklace of green jewels, like emeralds from her Uncle Frederick. Hilda, in turn, called hers the green fingers. But there were these bugs living on them, a lot of them, and more of them became every year, and the jewels got a little stained. But the bugs and the cities actually needed each other, so they had to find a way to learn and live in a symbiosis and somehow in harmony. And so the sisters had a sort of a fairy godmother, a very close friend of mine called Dis. Some of you know her, but if you don't, her name is an abbreviation of a disruption in space that points out disconnects between us and our environment, nature and each other, and trying to reconnect them. Dis enjoys exploring. So this spring, she was rummaging around Brenda and trying to connect with its inhabitants, the little bugs. So she tried to help them notice disconnects and dysfunctional spots on the green veins. And here she's trying to find her way along the green corridor to cross Route 9. And it was very comforting for her to notice that the strangers passing by were very eager to help her across the street. So it was not as difficult as she imagined. Trying to go from one part of the greenway to another. Right. This is what it would be like.
All right, so coming up in a step.
she managed to live, and so did they. But after her experience in Brenda, this came to the Central Park of Hilda, the oldest of the green fingers there. Orientation is a problem there as well. She couldn't see anything, but by the sound of some Nordic walking, she could spot some natives. So she asked them if they knew which street they were under, but no one really knew. They only told her that she does seem lost, and wondering why she looks like a green Teletubby. So it wasn't so easy to orient there either, and disconnects were found as well. But this was useful as a living chair as well. The young inhabitants of Brenda, had no problem connecting to her and even talking to her and sitting on her. But Hilda's Central Park had more rabbits than people, and they were actually harder to connect with. They just looked at her like she was crazy and wondering what she was doing there dressed in this clean cloth. So this said to the sister cities, both of you have beautiful islands, but it should be easier to get to them. So the competitive sisters argued, well, look at your parks. They are so dark. Our bridges have lights. And see, my bridges connect and yours disconnect, said Hilda. But they look exactly the same, yelled Brenda. And we both have winter, but my bugs just grab their skis and go instead of shutting everything down, said Hilda. But my bugs enjoy each other's company instead of lying around half naked on their own, said Brenda. But there was something they could both agree on, which is the lesson of this fairy tale, that green and blue spaces of a city need to come together and form an interconnected network of continuous entities and greenways and nodes, and actually also places to do things, where you can exercise sports or even have a flea market if you want. So this network, as we get more and more showers along the climate change, can also hold a lot of the water. The symbiosis between a city, nature, and its people is fostered by accessible, diverse, and beautiful green and blue space, with inviting entrances like doors to a house. And they all agreed that it's good for bodies as well as souls to spend time in green space. It's like an apple a day, a park a day keeps the doctor away. And you also need places where you can stop for a treat. Karelian pierogies, said Hilda. Oysters, said Brenda, or even grow your own. And then this fell asleep and had a beautiful dream about cities in which everyone can live in harmony with each other and with nature, happily ever after, no matter what you look like or what you enjoy doing.
David Perks, Disaster to Resilience.
Okay. So I'm going to talk about how a community begins to understand how resilience is not just responding to abrupt changes, such as Katrina, but how then resilience then ties into slow changes, and how in fact, as communities work on slow changes, they are able to focus on making their community more resilient for the more abrupt changes. So I've been working on the Mississippi Gulf Coast now since Hurricane Katrina, and so it's been certainly a very challenging workplace, but a workplace that certainly is a good case study as to how then disaster begins to lead to the work of resilience. One of the things that was very clear from the very beginning was the resilience is about the people that live in the community. So as we began then the work that we were doing in our design studio, very determined to make sure that the housing programs then that we were a part of really focused on the individual households, recognizing that the resilience of the community is so dependent upon people being invested in their place. And so we then created a housing program where there was a stubborn determination to make sure that from start to finish, the homeowners would be involved in the design process. So very much an aspect that equity is about choice, and it's about design choice. And so this is a kind of gallery of, we did over 250 houses, each one different. each one then working with the homeowner, so the house then becomes then their house. But what we began to realize was, as we were working, this is a map of East Biloxi, a community we've done a lot of our work in, and the marks then are the houses. We began to realize then there's the ground condition of resilience that began to become much more a part of our work. And so our work then has been looking at both the challenges of communities in flood zones and how do you begin to provide ways to build in flood zones, and also recognizing that that the landscape itself, in our case, the tidal waterways, are such a key part of the community resilience. So our work then has certainly begun to look at how it is that the community can work together to take their waterways and begin to make them into spaces of resilience, but in a way that is very much around community engagement. These little tidal waterways are both our stormwater system, they're our floodways, but importantly, in our environment, they're also the source of our economy. So this is then a project sort of showing how to take a degraded, channelized storm drain, essentially, that had lost all of its ecosystem function, and not restore it because the environment has changed so much because of development, begin to reestablish it as a full-service ecosystem, and recognizing them as a community that gets engaged in this process, that it helps them raise the value of the understanding of their own place. So this is a slide that I timed my slide so I'd have more time on this slide, because this is, I think, the story that I think is important for all of us, and that is asking the question, is what has happened in the last 10 years or so that we're here talking about resilience. So this is a kind of timeline of the work that our design studio in Biloxi has been involved with from Katrina to now, and I'm going to, without going through all of them, kind of start from the sort of right-hand side, the most recent, and just highlight a few things I think that are important. In fact, to kind of jump right into the middle, because Harriet's right here. So that point right in the middle where HUD's Office of Sustainable Communities became the Office of Economic Resilience, in many ways is an important kind of mark in this timeline toward resilience. And recognizing then that when we were working after Katrina, the word resilience was not part of the conversation, but it was part of the work, and it was laying the foundation so that when Hurricane Sandy came along, Superstorm Sandy, the time and the place was right to begin to get communities engaged in the work of resilience. So right now, in fact, it's hard to be here for me because I'm working with our state right now in the National Disaster Resilience Competition, which is very much a way to begin to tie in disaster with resilience. Then another important initiative that then we're a part of in our design studio is the AIA is beginning a national resilience initiative, looking at how to then identify programs such as ours that are bridging between universities and the profession to begin to find ways to provide leadership and the networking to begin to help communities work together around resilience. But I think it's important for all of us to recognize that the transition towards resilience is one that really taps into the way that our communities can work together to make stronger places, both for the abrupt changes and also the slow changes. And my time's up.